I'm going to talk about magic, health, like, you know, how science and spirituality should have never been separated. But, you know, when you look at certain concepts said that humanity is born into sin, and we start to say, well, what is sin? You get what I'm saying? And sin, normally we look at that as rooted out of evil. And when you look at evil, and you look at the word evil spelled backwards is live. When you see the word devil, that's lived. Now, which one is good and bad, right? So we start to say, well, you know, we're under the concept of morality, so we label something bad and good. But there's a big difference, for example, when we start to look at us being born into sin and the inversion that we do things that we're not designed to be designed to do. For example, like a lot of people here focus on health and diet and whatnot, and for what purposes? You know what I'm saying? A lot of people will do it for trying to be healthier or acquire spiritual gain to some extent. But in other words, you're catering to some form of humanity. When it's self-serving, when you do it for others, let's say if I eat a certain way and my body consists of all the people on the planet, because my reality is me inverted inside out, then I'm fasting. It's a sacrifice to humanity to some extent. So I am actually enduring certain hunger pains or certain stresses to myself, and it requires discipline in order for me to be able to complete this task for the purpose of changing the world, right? Because what happens when you fast? There's a lot of science to what happens when you fast. You know, you flush out a lot of cancerous cells, a lot of things that don't belong in the body come out. You know, a lot of the times we say we do things and try to control certain situations or try to eliminate certain things out of our life, when in actuality, everything just happens itself. Everything balances out itself when you are doing it from a certain space. Like a lot of people all of a sudden probably want to eat healthy or change their lifestyle when they get a traumatic news from a doctor saying that they're about to die. Now all of a sudden they are trying to change everything, but it was never rooted out of love. It was never coming from a space of self-love or, you know, for the let's say the sins of the planet, right? Sins is inverted. So you're trying to cleanse and purify the world of that. But instead it's out of fear. Now it can also be some pros to it, because what is required for you to fast and to actually endure these things is discipline. And when we look at Christ had disciples, and those disciples, that word discipline comes out of that word disciple, right? Because you can have a lot of motivation, but if there's no discipline behind it, then it's not worth shit. It's just like knowledge. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if it's not backed up with some form of wisdom, then it ain't shit either, you know? So when you see the you know, nature and how it always wins, it always balances itself out. Your body is like nature. It always balances itself out. When you have certain toxicity, certain things in the body that don't belong there, or let's say certain people say, how do I get rid of certain toxic people in my life? You know, once you change, these people just fall off your life. That's exactly how these toxins, these things just fall off. You don't have to basically take violent flushes and things that still have some type of negative effect as far as burning like the gastrointestinal walls and whatnot, or dehydrating your body to force the body to eliminate these toxins by drawing all of the water out of the body. You get what I'm saying? It's not, you're doing it in a forceful state. So sometimes when we do these things outside of ourselves, we're kind of taking that forceful path, and there's always something that's not favoring you in that aspect. It's not coming from a space of love or purity. You know, there's some form of ulterior motive. So like when we talk about inversion, for example, we can also say, you know, we come in here as far as ignorance, right? Ignorance or innocence. A child is innocent. An adult is ignorant. So now a child is innocent coming into this world becomes ignorant. And that's more or less like what we look at the concept of evil or live, you know? Are you thriving or are you just surviving? See, a lot of people are just on literally just life support, you know, and they're not really living. life support because you're supported only by catering to the humanity of things outside of you. Like the certain things that stimulate you as a human and give you a dopamine rush, such as drugs, food and drug, which is in the same category, or even certain things outside of you, rather than using it for other, advanced purposes, you'll use it just for entertainment purposes. So these things are catering to humanity, and they're not used for advanced godly purposes. When we do, let's say magic, sometimes we'll use magic to acquire earthly gains, right? We'll use it for earthly purposes, like, let's say even spiritual power. But that requires you to tap into, let's say, let's say when we do shadow work, right? We address that inner child, and then when we address and face that inner child, we always look at that inner child as, something that's long gone. Like when we look at the pyramids, we say that's long, ancient, advanced, lost technology. That child is the technology, the gold miners, the God miner. You know what I'm saying? And when we look at that God or L, we take that letter L out of gold and we have God. Gold is a very high conductor of electricity. You know what I'm saying? Children are made of they're more water than we adults, which are more stiff, rigid, and basically more closed-minded. A lot of these things actually require an open mind as well. And this open mind is a childlike curiosity, not the curiosity as an adult to try to know or force learning something for ulterior motives or purposes. What is the purpose of why you're doing it? You think a child's just being a child. A lot of people try to, get into the childlike mentality, but you're trying to some extent, just like you're trying to change a situation that happened to you, and now all of a sudden you're, trying to change your health because you've been told that you're going to die. You may have your life all fucked up, so that's what makes you want to tap into your inner child. You should always have been a child. In fact, you're a child now. The child has gone nowhere. You changed your way of doing things, no different than technology has changed also. Because, see, technology is gauged by the advances we've made, right? Yet we can't design things exactly how we designed them once upon a time in history, like the ancient pyramids, the megaliths and monoliths. It's not to say that we cannot replicate it, but it would cost billions of dollars to replicate it. And it's actually very, very difficult to replicate it exactly as it is, aligned to the constellations to some extent, laid along ley lines, and of course, perfectly aligned to a pole star. You get what I'm saying? So we start to question, and I'm going to get into another video on the pyramids, the land, the skin, and all that. And then we start to look at that and say, well, okay, now we use the alien conspiracy theory to say that, we're so limited that we needed help from things outside of us. Like even like, for example, for you to, be here, you're in hopes that God is going to save you one day, So you leave your now moment to be in the future, and you're always in that energy or frequency of hope. You get what I'm saying? So when you're born into sin, okay, a couple things I wanted to talk about here. Okay. Mindlessly and mindfulness. Okay. Mindlessly and mindfulness. When we start to talk about the mind is all and the universe is mental. Okay. It's to say that somebody may say, well, I eat what I want because I am aware, or I don't believe in these foods are going to kill me. You get what I'm saying? Let's say if you're trying to communicate with Jesus Christ, right? But Jesus Christ is not real, okay? But you have a thought form of Jesus Christ, and you can enhance that thought form through ritual or breath work and whatnot, right? So if it's not real, yet you can have your idea of what Christ is and you're enhancing it through ritual. The key components is breath work, imagination, and faith and belief, right? So these are the key components for you to actually be able to connect with a Christ figure, or connect with a demon, or connect whatever it is that you're trying to connect to, right? But you know they're not real, okay? So you start to ask if they're in your head or are they actually real things. So the fact that they're thought forms, okay, and you know of it, it's already in you. You get what I'm saying? So let's say, for example, and this is the thing though, one of the key things here and what gives it so much power is that people have so much faith, belief, and imagination in this thought form or this character that it holds a lot of energy. It's just like we could say money is an illusion, money is not real, it's not backed up by anything, yet it has so much value. It's because of the value that people put into it. In fact, it's a symbol of power because it's like we can say that it means nothing, is not backed up by anything, but look what people do. They betray friends. You know, relationships have been broken up. People have killed each other for money. We call it blood money and whatnot. And that's why it holds so much power. Yet somebody could be aware that it's an illusion. Yet you'll still use that money for you to be able to have this human experience. Okay? So when we start to talk about Jesus Christ or demons and whatnot, there's they're thought forms, and they have a lot of belief and imagination from the people outside of you, which are batteries. These people are batteries. That's why attention is the biggest currency on the planet, right? Attention. That's why social media, all these things, followers, views, that's why that brings in a lot of, and they call them fans, right? Sometimes they're not really, there for, let's say, educational purposes. They're just trying to be entertained, right? But they're fans. If you have an incense stick and the little glow on top, when you blow on it or fan it, it gets brighter, right? So that's kind of like what fans are. They blow your spark. They make your spark glow, right? But the attention also, you're perceived as somebody who has high credibility and more power. Just like somebody may be perceived to be more powerful because they have more money. But does that really mean that they're more powerful? See, everybody has access to that money, but it's a consciousness that blocks you from acquiring or attracting that money, because a lot of people are chasing it rather than having that be attracted to you. Just like I made in the video, what are the reptilian shapeshifters, right? You see, you, for example, mold and acclimate yourself to make yourself conducive to society. For you to have a human experience. You can't just go around and do whatever the fuck you want, because you may even be locked up. They may rob you of your human experience because you weren't conducive to society, right? So you have to acclimate to your environment, right? But at the end of the day, with your mind also, right? Creation is already created. But you can, with your mind, what you can do is actually have reality mold and shape to you. Because that's why they say where there's a will, there's a way. But it has to be at your will. And what's your willpower at? Where's your faith, belief, and imagination in yourself to be able to acquire these things to change outside of you for you? You get what I'm saying? So now, for example, we start to say, well, we're looking at the reptilian side of ourselves, outside of ourselves, but everything's created. Just like creation's been created, the creature is also created. So how creation is already created, you acclimate to society for you to have a human experience. So I walk around in the business world a certain way to be able to have an experience in that world. If I'm around my friends or let's say whatever it may be, you are kind of like doing reptilian shapeshifting. You are acclimating and molding to your environment so you can blend in, right? But you can also stand out. But when you stand out, what happens? You leave yourself vulnerable. Is vulnerability a bad thing? No, we're all vulnerable. We're vulnerable the moment we put ourselves out on camera. You got to understand, there's always going to be people open to go against your points of views and whatnot. Spiritual strength and what you believe about yourself determines if this breaks you down or not. And if certain things break you down, you're also measured by how quick you could build yourself back up. It's spiritual strength and mentality, right? Your body is also repairing itself at all times. The whole aging process, evolution is all an illusion, right? Because if you look at, for example, we have stem cells that are able to repair ourselves at all costs, right? I'll make another video on that because I don't want to go too deep into the biology and all that, because that's going to be tied into the real alien invasion video. But Just like creation's already created, I want you to understand this. When you eat certain foods, and this is why I say magic, spirituality, science and spirituality should have never been separated. Because when you eat foods, whether you know it or not, it's a ritual. You're creating rituals every day, whether you're mindlessly aware or not aware, unconsciously aware. I want to read two things to you. I'm going to read the definition of what mindlessly means. It's without justification and with no concern for the consequences, without thinking or using one's intelligence. Okay? So a couple of pros and cons to this. Whenever you're trying to reach your pure state, they tell you reach a state of no mind, you reach godhood, right? So they say that when you lose your mind, you're able to find yourself. So you have to lose yourself to find yourself, right? However, when you are doing this and it's not in a balanced state, to some extent, you are not conducive to society. When you create magical rituals, let's say, you're mindfully doing it for a specific purpose or an outcome. So if I make a ritual, a money ritual, in my mind, okay, I'm in the present moment, but I'm mindful of my acts to have a certain outcome. But then what I do is I don't think about it afterwards, right? But I'm mindfully doing it in the moment. I'm going to talk about the mindful definition. Mindfulness is the type of meditation in which you focus on being intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling in the moment without interpretation or judgment. All right. Practicing mindfulness involves breathing methods, guided imagery, and other practices to relax the body and mind and help reduce stress. Okay. So we can look at certain things as far as spirituality and humanity. Okay. When you're eating certain foods, okay, you may say, I don't believe this food can kill me. I'm way above these foods, so I'm going to eat whatever I want. It doesn't matter. But again, the same way that you would have to, for you to be in society, you have to conduct yourself a certain way to be conducive to society. Okay? There's a chemistry that's happening with certain foods that you're eating as well that affect your mental state because it's affecting the gut microbiome and it's also affecting the cells in your body, affecting the consciousness to an extent where it's not to say your intellectual consciousness goes away, but your spiritual consciousness is atrophied. Okay? Because what you're doing is you're feeding your humanity every time you overconsume foods or consume genetically modified foods, because you are a genetically modified organism, in case you didn't know that. That's why you have a reptilian brainstem to you. You have mammalian, neomammalian. You've got bacteria. That, like, you know, hundreds of trillions of viruses in the body. You're barely human. 2% of you is literally what they say the viruses for your DNA that it makes you evolve as a because you're a thought form also. You're formed here as a human thanks to the viruses. Okay? And only 2% of that, the 98% is junk DNA, right? So the junk DNA is that kickstarted by you. Man usually kickstart these transformers, right? So whenever you are connecting with people as well, they can actually activate your DNA to some extent. People actually genuinely loving you, just like a plant with your presence, can actually enhance the vibrancy of the environment. Okay? You are basically affecting other people energetically, because that's all we are. We're energy and waves entangling with each other. That's what we call energy or quantum entanglement. All right? But you could be a beneficial or a malevolent virus. But it's all based on your consciousness. You get what I'm saying? So if I'm eating certain foods, right, and I'm mindful of the fact, okay, that I acquired knowledge that it does have harm, then I'm only creating a ritual within me based on the belief and the collective belief of what everybody outside of you has that will enhance that certain idea that we would call a disease. So it's in your head, but there's still a collective consciousness, all right, that's involved here. So for example, like I mentioned, Jesus Christ is not real. However, you can affect your idea of what Jesus is as a consciousness gets raised, right? But through your acts and work, proper breathing, imagination, visualization, you enhance that character or that energy within you, right? Disease is nothing but an idea, and it's considered a bad idea, right? It's because it's unfavorable, right? People do rituals for wealth. You're doing rituals for health. Health is wealth still, right? So if I'm eating mindfully and I know that it has a negative chemistry, yet I think I'm only thinking from the ego. Because if you drink strychnine, you're going to die regardless of how many times you sit here and say that strychnine is an illusion. There is no spoon Neo, and it's not going to kill me. And I'm just going to drink strychnine. You get what I'm saying? Some people may even kill themselves with alcohol. They'll kill themselves with certain drugs. You know what I'm saying? Thinking from the ego that these things are below them. However, you have no idea that you're actually still operating from that ego space. You know? So when I'm eating foods of a higher chemistry or certain things of nature, I'm feeding a different, higher level of myself. It's just like when you listen to information and you buy into it because your mind is weak, then you may start to create a simulation within a simulation. Okay? So that's the whole thing. I think I read the other note, didn't I? I don't know. I read the mindfulness and mindful, I think. But anyway. And if I didn't, I'll just make another video. So check this out. Any kind of ritual you do normally, a big part of this is your breathing, right? Your breathing. And don't forget, when you eat certain foods, they create a negative chemistry in the body. No different than you going outside and not being conducive to society. They create a fight or flight environment in your body. So it changes your breathing patterns. You don't no longer breathe properly. Your heart rate frequency, if you may develop high blood pressure, you may develop diabetes, you may develop, some type of dis-ease, where it's all created from the root of one thing, and that's stagnation. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I feel humanity is. Humanity is just being stagnant, not really progressing, because they're still in the mindset of depending on things outside themselves to cater to, to look at that as something higher than themselves to get them somewhere they want to be, where this is not even a place. I mean, I can't even word these things sometimes. And usually if you were to actually talk like God in the present moment, you wouldn't even make sense. You know what I'm saying? If you were talking without the concept of time, without, looking at yourself as a human, you would sound like somebody who's crazy. Like, you would look at interviews like with Charles Manson or, certain people that we would technically call insane. These people were actually speaking more from a space of godhood than being insane, The worldwide psychosis is the people you think look normal to you. The people who are insane, maybe that's not really what we would consider insane. Just like we're looking at things bad and good, what is really the bad and good? Now, I'll make this disclaimer. This channel is for adults, so I'm not telling you that the bad things that people have done are good and you should go do these things, or you should lose your mind, do drugs, or none of that. Don't do drugs. These are bad and illegal. And don't listen to me. I'm not a medical doctor. You know what I'm saying? So I only say this just to make sure that I protect my video. But if you really look at these things, the things that you're mostly afraid of are the upgrades of your system to some extent. These are the things you face when you face your fears. With the fear, you know what's crazy though? A fearful man's courage is another one's fear. Okay? That's something that's very, very powerful, because you start to look at these viruses and you're programmed to fear these things, but these things are upgrades. You're meant to process a virus. See, you coexist with all these viruses already within you anyway. You get what I'm saying? The weaker cells, they bond to these things, and then you just have an immune response. I'm going to make another video because I got to cover a couple of other things. But if you like this video, like it, and we'll talk soon.